All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I apologize for interrupting what I'm sure is riveting, groundbreaking conversations at your tables. I'm sure you're solving all the world's problems, or at least that's what I expect you to be doing. But I am not sorry for getting our program kicked off because I'm really excited about our lunch plenary speaker today. I hope you all are enjoying. How's the conference going so far? Yeah? Okay, good. I've been bouncing back and forth. I'm getting my steps in today, up that escalator, across the tunnel, down the escalator. We thought, oh, this will be great. We can put PIs over here and scholars. I forgot that I was going to be going back and forth. But it's been so exciting to kind of see what's going on in both spaces. I think the scholars, I hope, are having an equally good experience. That seems to be the tenor. I will say, I think Lane mentioned this morning. I'll echo. I know that many of you have been busy with your own conference and taking care of yourselves and getting some break. But if you have the chance to message or stop by, please do check in with your scholars. Especially as we know that for many of them, this is their first professional conference ever. So I experienced a whole lot of conversations this morning with scholars where I was explaining to them that, yes, the lunch or the breakfast plenary did start at 7:30, and the talking part started at 8, and yes, we did expect them to be there. So learning lessons, right? Like lessons learned, hopefully. So please do check in with your scholars. I don't expect you to be miracle workers, but I know that your friendly nudging is actually very beneficial to them. So, it's all the things you don't remember that you know how to do when you're very proficient at navigating conferences like yourselves. So, our plenary speaker today is President Annette Parker from South Central College. Dr. Parker started her career at General Motors, where she met her husband, Jeffrey. With the decline in the auto industry, she pursued education at Lansing Community College, and while at LCC, she developed a passion for teaching and completed her bachelor's and master's in education. She then became a full-time instructor and eventually an administrator. After 17 years at LCC, Dr. Parker accepted a position with the Kentucky Community and Technical College System, or KCTCS, where she completed her doctoral degree. At KCTCS, Dr. Parker led the Automotive Manufacturing Technical Education Collaborative, an NSF Advanced Automotive Manufacturing Center of Excellence. In 2013, Dr. Parker made history by becoming the first woman and Black woman to assume the role of president at South Central College. Yes, that's worth applause. Her extensive industry knowledge and higher education experience have been instrumental in enhancing the college's capacity to serve its students and the community. In 2017, she championed a grassroots initiative to join Achieve the Dream. Thanks to the collective efforts of students, faculty, and staff, the college was recognized as an Achieve the Dream Leader College in 2022, demonstrating its commitment to closing equity gaps through course offerings and a redesign of student support services. Dr. Parker's dedication to advancing the college's mission and supporting regional economic competitiveness is further demonstration through her involvement in national boards. In 2014, she was appointed to President Obama's Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, or AMP, Steering Committee 2.0. And in 2019, she served on the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT's, Work of the Future Advisory Board, and has served on several committees and advisory boards for the National Academy of Science. Please join me in welcoming President Parker.
Good afternoon. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our moniker is at South Central College and frame this whole conversation around what we talk about as just one more. And at South Central College, if each one of us make a difference for just one more student every day, that we're making a difference in the lives of our students. We're making sure that they become productive citizens and that they're civically engaged in our community. Yeah, I'm going to go past that and just say that South Central College is part of the Minnesota state system of colleges and universities. And so, yeah, who's here from South Central or from Minnesota State? All right, shout out. It's made up of 26 community and technical colleges and 7 universities. We have a state board of trustees, and all of the college presidents report to our chancellor. So I'm going to tell you a story about me. And I'm going to refer you to the picture of the little girl. That's me. And if you look at her face, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that expression. Okay? So, first of all, I was a middle child, so nothing special. And, but when I take you back to a place, which will explain why I'm retiring next June, this little girl was the first of 3 students in her city to be desegregated. Okay? And so the city was moving towards desegregation in Jackson, Michigan, and they set a line, and my house just happened to be 1 block before they cut the line off. So the first year, it was me and 2 other African-American students that got on a bus and went to a white community for school. That's my first day of the 1st grade. Okay? So then the middle picture is Angela Davis, right? But peace. I didn't see a path to higher education. My parents were divorced. My mother went back to school to take care of us. And I just didn't think it was possible for me. My mother got her first car when I was 18 years old. Okay? And so what I did was, you know, at that time, General Motors were hiring 5,000 people to work at Oldsmobile in Lansing. So I stood in a very long line to be employed by Oldsmobile. And so did my husband. Now, we grew up together. His mother was my playground supervisor, which is why she wasn't fond of me for the first 15 years. Okay? But we met each other, in a huge plant where there were 25,000 employees. And when we got hired, they were bringing in people 100 an hour, if you can imagine that. 100 new employees every hour. And it was like, hey, I know you. And it went from that to, you want to go to lunch? To, are you ready to go to lunch? And so we got married, and you can see our 3 beautiful children in the other picture, Jonathan, Adrian, and Ashley. And that's my husband, Jeff, and the A's and J's, yep, it's intentional. Okay? And we got to a point where we were, Jeff hired in July, and I hired in August, but remember, 100 people an hour. So it got to the point where I would get laid off, and good, I could stay home and take care of the kids for a couple of months. And then Jeff started getting laid off. Okay? And what do American families do? You sit down at a meal together, and you talk about what's going on in your life, what's going on at school, and your future. Okay? And so we saw the doors closing at General Motors. We had every intention of retiring at 48 and going fishing. That was our plan. And it looked like that wasn't going to happen. Okay? And so the plants were closing down in Lansing. And we said, well, somebody better go back to school. So my husband said, you go back to school, and I'll take care of the kids. Okay? And so I went to Lansing Community College in my mid-20s, typical community college student. The average age at South Central College right now is 26 years old. And I thought, man, I'm going to be too old. I got to walk into this college with these kids, only to get there and realize that most of the students were just like me. Okay? And Jeff wasn't very good at doing little girls' hair, so that explains the picture there. And my sisters and my brother lived very close to me. That's my brother in the middle, my youngest brother. On picture day, they'd come and make sure that Ashley and Adrian didn't need retakes. And so we got through it. And so that's why this is titled When One Door Closes, Another Opens. And so I want to talk about that because I went to Lansing Community College, as I mentioned, and I thought I would be too old, and quite frankly, I needed developmental math. I needed the principles of math, and I took a placement test, and my instructor said, well, Annette, you don't need the whole course. You need the end of the course. And there were days that my kids would be sick, and I'd call him. He was a dean, but I didn't know what a dean was. And he'd say, I said, you know, Ron, the kids are sick. I don't know if I can make it to class. And he said, well, I told you didn't need to be here to the end of the class. But I'd show up anyway. Okay? So what did that lead to? So one day, I'm in the machine shop, and my degree is in engineering technology, actually drafting. And so I'm in the machine shop, and the faculty had observed me tutoring students. And I'm getting ready to go upstairs and get my degree audit signed in the construction and engineering department when I leave the machine shop. And they said, Annette, do you want a job tutoring students? And I was laid off from General Motors at the time. So I said, yeah. Okay, didn't know what tutoring meant, but I'm gonna do that. Okay, so I went upstairs and I met with Ron. Remember the math teacher? They said, you don't need this to the end of class. And he says, Annette, do you want a job tutoring students in the drafting and CAD labs? And I said, yeah. And I went home and told Jeff, I says, I got 2 jobs. Okay, and we know student employees can't have 2 jobs. So about a week later, they contacted me and he says, you can't do that. Do you want a promotion? So I became a lab tech. And I was like, yeah, I doubled my wage, okay? And what happened there is about 6 months later, Ron told me, he says, Annette, Marv's gonna be late for class. Can you go up and sit in that class and help the students out? And I'll tell you what, you guys, I had been over to Michigan State University because this kid, or young adult, that went into Lansing Community College who thought, I'm too old for this, started getting 4 points. I graduated with a 3.98 GPA. And that told me I could do it. So guess where I went? I went over to Michigan State University. Is anybody here from there? Yeah. I went over there. I'm going to disappoint you in a second. I went over there, but I love you guys. I have a niece there right now. Actually, her dad was in that picture. But I went over there and signed up for engineering, but that day I learned that I really love teaching. I said, I love this. And not only did I want to be a teacher, I wanted to be a career and technical education teacher. So they didn't offer that at Michigan State, so I went to Ferris State University. Yeah. Yeah. I got some friends in this room. So I went to Ferris State University. I got my bachelor's degree, and before I could start student teaching at LCC with high school kids, the summer before I started my master's degree at Ferris, completed that. And during that process, I became qualified and certified to teach high school kids, and we had a high school program. And so I went from part-time faculty to full-time faculty. And I also did a lot of corporate training. So as you got to imagine an African-American female going into a corporate boardroom with laptops to train a bunch of engineers how to use a CAD system. And they'd underestimate me. I knew they would, but then I always wanted to see how many of them would follow me to the coffee machine when we took a break, which they always did. And then one day, General Motors continued to decline, and at that time, the folks from Michigan are going to remember Governor John Engler was creating what they called Michigan Technical Education Centers, and that were a different kind of college that was competency-based, modularized curriculum, open entry, open exit. And he promised General Motors, if you build 2 plants here, we will build you an MTech at Lansing Community College. And so when that happened, Ron and Bill came to me and says, Annette, you're going to apply for that administrative position, right? Finally, I says, yeah, Bill, I'm going to apply. And I went into administration to help design and build that building and the curriculum. After I did that for a while, Toyota came up to Lansing and the Kentucky Community and Technical College System, and they had a vision for creating a national center of excellence in automotive manufacturing over their concern over the competitiveness of American automotive manufacturing. So my president said at that time, and that's going to be your contact, and I became a co-PI of that. And then shortly after I served there and I brought them to Lansing to see what we were doing, they asked me to move to Kentucky to lead the National Center. So off to Kentucky, and I always say unbridled spirit. Who's here from Kentucky? Yeah. So my doctorate degree is from Western Kentucky University. Okay, no, there's no hilltoppers in the room. Okay. And so I ran Amtech for 6 years. It was a multi-state collaborative that was funded through the NSF ATE as a National Center of Excellence. We grew Amtech to serve 34 automotive centers through 13 different states, working with European, Asian, and American automakers. At a very turbulent time, we were awarded the grant in October of 2008, and if you remember, that's when Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler were flying planes into DC for a bailout. And I had partners in Tennessee that said, let them go under. And thank God that that didn't happen, because what people didn't understand about the auto industry is that if any one of the American companies had went under, they all would have. Because you can pick your vehicle now, but they all had the same parts inside. And the supplier base would have been devastated. And so we also started partnering with, I was brought into a lot of conversations. We started partnering with the European Union. We had a grant through the European Union to take our standards and compare them to EU standards. I took a trip to India with Hillary Clinton. I worked in China, and so my career really just kind of blew up while I was in Kentucky. But I completed my doctorate degree, and the week after commencement, I received 2 calls, one from Minnesota and one from the U.S. Department of Education. And we talked a lot about mentors. I was watching this morning session. I found that really interesting. My mentor told me, I was really, President Obama had just been reelected when I was asked to be Deputy Assistant Secretary. And that enamored me. I was just like, oh, I got to do this. I get to work for Obama. And my mentor said, Annette, you don't want to go to D.C. and sit in a cubicle. And you like purses, right? And I says, yeah. She says, go buy one and get your butt up to Minnesota. So there's the rest of the story. But before I went to Minnesota, I talked about the fact that my career was really exploding. I was asked to testify before Congress and about workforce and how community colleges played a role in the automotive sector. And there I am the day I was appointed to the presidency of South Central College. I thought I wasn't going to be able to work with the Obama administration, but 3 months after I arrived in Minnesota, I get a call in my office, and it's Secretary Pritzker. And she said, Annette, President Obama wants you to serve on his Advanced Manufacturing Steering Committee. And I had the honor of serving as the vice chair for workforce with Eric Spiegel, who at that time was the president of Siemens North America. And we set the path and the direction for apprenticeships with stackable credentials for manufacturing with the Obama administration. And what I did with that is, when I arrived in Minnesota, the chancellor said, Annette, I want you to be president of South Central College, but I also want you to help with workforce across the state of Minnesota. And I'm like, I'm a brand new president, yeah, right. I'm gonna tell 34 other presidents what to do. That's not gonna happen. But I learned what I needed to do once I was on that committee. I said, here's my role. So President Obama called his partnership Advanced Manufacturing, AMP 2.0. We named ours MinAmp for Minnesota AMP, and we set ourselves up for a Department of Labor grant that set up apprenticeships throughout the state of Minnesota and also helped create legislation that we now call in Minnesota Pipeline Program, which pays employers and students to enter apprenticeship. So I'm going to tell you another joke because I like to keep you guys giggling a little bit so you stay awake after that brisket was good. The middle picture was when President Obama came to Minnesota to support the light rail. So let me tell you a little joke about that. That's me. Do you see my face? And look at President Obama's expression. Pictures say a lot, don't they? So I had learned because I'll take you back. If you remember when Obama was running against Mitt Romney, and I was working with the Jeep plant in Toledo, Ohio. Toledo in the room? Ohio? Okay. So I'm working with them, and they said, we're going to get President Obama up here. And so I says, well, you got to get me in if that happens. And sure enough, I was in the front row with President Obama. And what happened is, you know how they come off the stage and they come around, they start shaking hands. And President Obama got up to me, and he had his hands like this, and people are reaching over me, right? So when he did that, I grabbed this hand. My husband's right here. So then he put up his other hand, and I grabbed that one too. Okay. And you could see him laughing at me, right? And he kind of pulled his hand loose and grabbed my husband's hand. But what I learned is that at least with Obama, he has the red line, the white line, the blue line, right? Red line's always up front. So when he came to Minnesota, guess what I got? An invite to the red line. And so I knew what was going to happen, and I said, I need a picture. So I gave these people behind me my phone. I says, he's going to get up to me, and I'll turn, and you take a picture. And my husband looks at the picture. He says, it looks like you're pickpocketing him. Okay. But I just needed to tell you guys that every time I see that, it's like, yeah. And I've got this devious look on my face, right? But anyway, after serving with on AMP 2.0, I started getting invites into the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. This is just some list of some of the committees that I've served on with the academies, and a part of a publication for building America's skilled technical workforce. You know, when I became a community college president, I says, I'm done with just focusing on manufacturing. I want to be more broad. But nationally, still today, I get called into anything around manufacturing or specifically workforce. So I just said, okay, that's my space. Okay, I'll claim it. And so when I served on President Obama's Advanced Manufacturing Steering Committee, it was chaired by President Reif at MIT and Andrew Liveris, who at that time was the president or CEO of Dow Chemical. And after I'd served there, I get a call again in my office, and it's President Reif. And he says, Annette, do you remember me? And I says, how the hell do you remember me? And he says, we want you to serve on our advisory board for Work of the Future. And so I had the honor of serving there. I couldn't believe the list of people that I've worked with. I'm going to move on and say that we're also working right now with another group to look at really how do we help our students advance in community into through their curriculum into employment, especially for our all of our diverse students. And so we're currently working with this group to do that, the Corporation for a Skilled Workforce out of Ann Arbor. I want to talk now about the work that we've done, which is probably more important, but I really wanted you to understand my background. A lot of people think it is quite miraculous. I know that I have been blessed to have experienced a lot of things and to be a model for my students, which I do a lot, and we'll talk about that. So when I came to South Central College, we went through strategic planning and we changed our mission statement. Community colleges used to be all about access. It was all about butts and seats, okay? And we kept that word from the old mission statement, but when we talk about accessible at South Central College, it's bigger than butts and seats. It's about, we have a program called the Uniquely Abled Academy for high-functioning autistic students. We have the School for the Deaf and the School for the Blind. And how do we make sure that South Central College is accessible to them? And how do we make sure that we're being inclusive for all students that cultivates their success while it advances regional economic development? And we want to be a leader in that work. And so we claim it in our vision statement. And here's our institutional priorities. I want to first talk about just one more, because just one more is key to everything that we do. How do we make a difference every day for just one more student? And then how we did that was, as a community college, many times we don't have robust research departments that can really mine our data Tell us what's working and what's not. We built that capacity at South Central College. We looked at regional and cultural partnerships. How do we reach out to our communities? We have something that we started at South Central College is called Somali Night, where we invite in the entire Somali community, and all of the literature is in their language, all of the food is in their language, and it's presented by Somali people. We do the same thing with Latin Night, and we hold those several times a year. We invite not just students, but their parents. We invite the imam, everybody. We want them to know we see you, okay? While we're working on these 6 goals here, or 7. And it focuses on just one more, which is achieving a dream. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and the other core areas. One was called curricular pathways. How many of you have heard of guided learning pathways? My faculty did not want to call it that, so I don't care. We're going to do the work. It's curricular pathways. Now they do, but back then when we started, no way, okay? And then how do we have holistic student services? And the way I coin that is how do we wrap our arms around our students? How do we hold them up? Because first generation students, 60-some-odd% of community college students are first generation, low income students of color. And each one of those are a risk to not be successful. So if you have 1, you're at risk. If you have 2, you're more at risk. And 3, you're really at risk. So how do we close those equity gaps? Okay, so let's talk about just one more. So we began ATD in 2017, and what I did was I took some of the, everybody knows who the champion faculty are. If you're a good administrator, you know who the people are that you need to be talking to if you want to get something done. I sent them to Achieving a Dream, and I said, can we do this? And they said, sure. Still a little bit of, we'll see if we trust her. But I sent them, and then we submitted an action plan in the spring of 2018. So let me tell you how that happened. We started having world cafes. We were looking at our data. We were deciding everything, and we came up with 8 goals, which we set up 8 innovation teams to do the work of students, faculty, and staff. And the coaches, you get a data coach and you get a leadership coach. The leadership coach is usually a retired president. And I'm going to throw out another name. Our data coach came from Iowa State. Okay? And they would meet with me, and then they would meet with the college for a day and a half, and then they would meet with me again. And then they say, in about a week, you're going to get a letter. So sometimes there were challenges in that letter. I'd hear from faculty some of the things I didn't want to hear maybe. But what did I do with that letter? I shared it with the entire college community, and I said what I was going to do about every challenge that they brought up. And I did it. Okay? And so a year later, we had lunch we had an all-campus in-service day, and everyone had to vote. And everyone did vote because you didn't get a meal ticket until you did. Okay? And I took one of those trusted faculty members back with my VP of research, and we counted the votes. And we said, these are the 8 things you guys said we should do. And we set up innovation teams to work on them. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, I want to talk about how we scaled them. Because we became a hunger-free campus. We were one of the first in Minnesota to become a hunger-free campus. We have campus cupboards on campus. We have staff that pick and place and place that food somewhere where we're not shaming people to pick up that food. We we reduced the advisor to student ratio. I won't talk through all of these. I think they're big enough to read. Okay. One that's really big is we hired 2 counselors. We have 2 campuses. We have a counselor, a mental health counselor on each campus. And then we contract out with telepsychiatry to give us even more than those counselors can give us if a student needs a prescription or something of that matter. Okay? We purchased a CRM. And what we do with that is if a student needs a book the first day of class and they show up, they don't have their financial aid, so they don't have their book yet, guess what? Their teacher can send, or their faculty member can send an alert to their advisor. And then we have what we call the Lifesaver program, funded through our foundation, where within 24 hours, the foundation will get that book. Okay? So we're really trying to make sure that every student is successful. But more importantly, I want to talk a little bit about this graph here. This is the 8 innovation teams and how we move them from thought to implementation and integration, more importantly, into the college. They're not just initiatives that go away. Once we figure out how we're going to address it, how do we integrate it and sustain it? And I mentioned that we increased the student to advisor ratio, right? There were staff that didn't think they could tell me, Dr. Parker, we need to hire 4 more advisors. Okay, and so what we learned is that they needed more support. We couldn't just leave the innovation teams to do the work alone. So we created what we call the monitoring team. The vice president of research, the vice president of student and academic affairs, vice president of students, vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion, and elite faculty that would meet with them as they progress from looking at research and data to full integration, and would say, keep going, it's good, keep going. We support you, keep going, okay? And that's how we move that to full integration. And I think it's important for if you really want to build that kind of change to really create a process very similar to what we did about what is it that we're going to do together. I heard you. I support you. Keep going. Okay? Around that time, how many of you guys heard of Mankato, Minnesota recently? Yeah. So if you haven't, Tim Walz, Governor Tim Walz, is taught high school at Mankato West. When I arrived at Minnesota, he was my congressman, and he is now my governor, and he's going to remain that, I guess. But in Minnesota, our statewide plan is called Equity 2030. Minnesota knows that if we're going to be competitive in the workforce, we're going to have to make sure that 70% of all demographics are successful. And so this is the state plan. It's called Equity 2030. At our college, it's like, well, what are you doing? We got to do the state plan. We got to do the college plan. I'm going to go quickly through this. What this says is, this is our diversity, equity, inclusion plan, but we show through KPI alignment that the work that we do at the college is no different than the work we do with Minnesota State, or no different than the work we do around regional accreditation. It's all the same work. We're going to focus on what we do, and that will elevate the state plan, and it will make sure we're in compliance with regional accreditation. This is the important stuff. So when we became a leader college, this is how we proved it through our data. Pell eligible students in math gateway courses, completion rate increased by 20%. Black students in those same courses increased by 140%. Hispanic students in English gateway courses, completion rate increased by 70%. And it goes on and on. running short of time, so I'm just going to show you some of the other measures that we've been able to accomplish. And I'm proud to say that in 2023, we closed the Black African American equity gap at South Central College. Then we created a middle college model called High School to College and Career. The students at the local high school named it, created the logo for H2C. But high school students now at South Central College, 2 years ago we had 8 graduate with an associate degree before they graduated high school. This last year, 44. There's that family. No nieces and nephews. These are all kids and grandkids. But we have time for questions. I'll open it up for questions, and thank you so much for listening to our story.
Feel free to come to a mic. I will also be monitoring the chat and guidebook if anybody has a question. Yes, please feel free.
Hi, my name's Sue Monroe. I'm from Brookdale Community College, and we just signed on last year to Achieving the Dream. My issue is with it is they don't seem to really going after faculty advice. They basically said, we're going to eliminate foundational studies in math to increase the achievement gap, and without anything. And then most recently, they said, come up by next March with some plan that you can implement to address the achievement gap. And, oh, there's no money or time. So it really seems like, I understand, we did the data walk, and we understand the problem, but there's no resources to it or supportive faculty. And we just feel like there's people here having meetings and then telling us what to do. So it's a very frustrating experience so far with Achieving the Dream.
Thank you. I'm sorry for that. You know, I have 2 daughters, right? Adrian and Ashley. I talked about them. And I'll say this because this is the way I think about it. I've tried to be careful not to be demeaning, but when my girls became teenagers, I used to go shopping. I was like, oh, this dress is so cute, and I'd buy it. And I say, don't you like this dress? And then about a month later, I'm mad at them because their room is a mess. And I say, go clean that room up, and they still can't clean it up, right? So I come in, and I'm like making them clean it up, and I look under the bed, and there's that dress with the tags on it. So the moral of the story is, if you want change, and you really want people to own it, you include them, and you listen to what they tell you. So I talked about you spending a year, and then when I was challenged, I worked with my coaches to make sure that they pointed it out, that it came up in that letter, so I could deliberately address it and say, this is what I'm going to do about that. And I don't think that you can build anything that's sustainable without that. And so I'm sorry that it's going that way. Hopefully they'll figure it out. I also believe that persistence is revenue. As a community college president, persistence and success is revenue. So at community colleges, we can't just continue to fill the coffers. We need to make sure the students that we have are successful, and we grow in enrollment by bringing in more. But you've got to get the students that you have to be successful and complete. Yes, sir. Oh.
Thank you for your presentation. Would you talk to us about the impact of your story on your children and what they do?
The impact of my story has been very good for my children, especially my oldest daughter, who is a lot like me and very determined and very successful. But I think it also provided a lot of pressure, or put a lot of pressure on them. And I'm the last person in the world that they want to disappoint. So I think I see it both ways. I do want to say that my story, and I tell it a lot to our students, have been a real source of support and encouragement for our students at South Central College. Hi.
My name's Judith Canner. I'm at Cal State Monterey Bay. And in California, I'm not sure what it's like in the other places with student enrollments declining and things like that. And then we get legislated all the time as both a CSU and their community colleges. I'm curious what your experiences as a community college president have been in working with the four-year institutions around you. Right now, I feel like we keep getting things thrown at us from the legislature, and then there's competition for students. We also have the UC system. There's competition with the UC system for students as well. And I feel like it's creating less cohesion and more competition instead of this nice path, you know, like you were talking about, these pipelines, these pathways from high school to career. And there's so many different avenues for that, from two-year degrees and professional. What has been your experience in Minnesota? How have you sort of navigated that potential, you know, the demographic cliff and all that other stuff for declining enrollment since the pandemic, building collaborations with the four-year institutions? Yeah, what's your experience, I guess?
Well, I'll start by saying that as part of the Minnesota state system, we developed several years ago what we call transfer pathways. And it's the university faculty in collaboration with the two-year faculty building pathways. And South Central College has completely embraced that. I didn't get enough time to talk about the curricular pathways. I should have took a little bit out about myself. But we built quite a bit of curricular pathways, and it was just so exciting, all of the students that walked across the stage this past May that were in curricular pathways. And when I go over to Minnesota State University Mankato, so they're in Mankato and I'm in North Mankato, our sister institution, when I go to the student union, it's like I'm home. Our students are there. It's a natural transition. And the president there right now, Dr. Ed Inch, who came out of the Cal system, we're on fire. We just created a new college of agriculture with the first 2 years at South Central and then on to MSU. It's just, it's a natural thing, and the community, the employers are just ecstatic about it.
Hi, thank you so much. This is Ellen Milieu from Diablo Valley College, also community college in California. And I, again, only know about my little insulated place, but I feel like, at least in our community college system, there's a lot of flux in administration all the time. New people in, new people out. And the types of work that get put on the administration and the creep in their own work has made it such that it doesn't feel like the administration is really responsive to new and innovative things because they're so in the weeds all the time, or other things. Like, everybody's got their own issues. I just wonder, as a leader at your college, what have you found is the most important to get the whole administrative staff on board with your strategic initiatives and to get faculty to be on board with that in a partnership?
I really believe that in Minnesota, we are a labor state and we have shared governance. Some people think that that's scary if you're in a non-union state, but I don't. I think that that provides an opportunity to have the conversations. And even if you're in a non-union state, you need to have conversations and get input because, and I think I've really learned this from Toyota, no one has all of the answers. You need to include a lot of voices to get to the best place. That's how we all win. And so I just strongly believe in doing that and making sure that everybody's at the table. But we also are, when I showed our KPIs, and I could probably spend a whole session talking about that, but our plan is integrated. So, for example, we just added 2 inclusion centers for our students as part of our diversity plan. And the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion needed to implement that, but the CFO, who has business, facilities, and operations, needed to make sure it's in her plan. And so we show that integration in our planning all the way through. And we focus on the things that are most important in our plan to make sure that we're doing the work.
And do you feel like everybody at your college has, like, do you feel they're part of the growth and the progress? Or how do you make sure they're not all in the weeds all the time and that they actually are supporting the faculty who need the support when they're leading these things?
You know, when I have shared governance, I'm in those meetings, and believe me, I hear about it. I just think that it's about conversation. I have what you call presidential forums, and I am, making sure that the whole college is involved in them. And I changed them during COVID when we sent everybody home. We changed them from presidential forums to what we call Safe Campus. And everybody had input about how we address the things, the challenges, and the other things that we needed to do together, and really just to have that safe space together because people were missing each other. So you need to also provide those opportunities. I just remember, one of the things, one of my faculty helped me. I have these 2 little chihuahuas. They're 3.5 pounds each, and they're adults. And when they were puppies, they were running around, and one of my faculty says, Dr. Parker, put pool noodles under the sofas because they were running under the sofas. And so you really just have to include everybody, and that's what we've done. But if you were to go to South Central College and say, what is Just One More? And everybody knows what it is and they know what their role is in it. I do think that I learned because I'm pretty competitive too, and so I was kind of burying people when I first got there. And now we're very deliberate in what we do and strategic.
Thank you for sharing.
We have time for one more question.
Hi there, I'm Adrienne Minerick.
All right.
I'm from Michigan Tech, and the question I'm going to ask is a bit of a 90-degree turn from the recent questions you've got.
Okay.
And that is, what I heard in your talk was a lot of seeds for what I perceive to be a way that we can change the language for much of what we do so that it isn't attacked directly by the anti-DEI. And that is that I hear you as an expert in workforce development, and that we need to cultivate domestic talent, homegrown talent as much as possible. And so I'm curious if you've thought about taking a leadership role in providing many of us the language to be able to protect these programs as we encounter the frontal resistance to them.
That's a great question, very interesting, and I've thought about that. I sent out my notice of retirement in August after I talked to the college when faculty returned, and it was a pretty large distribution list of people I've met over my career, and I got so many notices back, Annette, you should work for the government, you should do this, you should do that, and I was actually thinking about it. I know you guys have heard of, I talked about Governor Walz, and he is who he says he is. I saw him back in February, and he's like, I remember when we first met, we were at an auction. He's just a cool guy, right? And he is the only Democrat that has ever won that district. And Mankato is a purple community, probably more red. I think this last election it went red. But what we agreed to is the sustainability, the vibrancy of our community. And so I have found a way to have that conversation with every group in Mankato, and there's not resistance to that if you talk about it in right ways. And so you heard me say when I started that we want productive citizens in our community. I could say that to anybody, and everybody would believe it, that we want our students civically engaged in the communities and giving back to those communities. There's not a group that would disagree with that. And when I talk about South Central College in the community, I say this, that we are the community's college. We were created as a community college, as the community's college. Therefore, we need to be building productive citizens for the community. And I think that that then lowers some of those tensions, and you can figure out how to work together.
Thank you.
Please join me in thanking President Parker again.